Welcome to AUHSD Future Talks. I'm your host, Michael Matsuda, the superintendent of the Anaheim Union High School District. And this program is all about the future, which is right now. Big decisions and challenges facing our young people in the world of work, in the world of careers, and in the world of life. And today we're so lucky to have a very special guest, one of our higher education partners, Stephanie Reyes-Tuccio, who is the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Education Partnerships at UC Irvine. And I wanted to start off, Stephanie, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off with the question about you, just your background growing up. We know that you went to UC San Diego. Oh, you started off at Fullerton College, transferred to UC San Diego, and you have your PhD from UC Irvine. And you specialize in history, racial and ethnic relations during the 20th century. So what makes you tick? And tell us a little bit more about who you are, Stephanie.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. And I hope that something from my story or my ideas is useful to someone. So I'm an Orange County kid, for sure, as you mentioned. I have grown up in both North and South Orange County. I grew up in Fullerton and then in San Juan Capistrano. And most people assume that since my passion and my work is with first-generation students, that I was a first-generation student as well. But I'm actually from a family of educators. So started off with my grandfather, who his family immigrated from Mexico, as did my grandmother's. And he worked in all the fields. Those of us who grew up in Orange County remember that if you used to drive along the 5 freeway, all you saw were fields. My grandfather picked all the crops from here to Seal Beach and went to a segregated school in Orange, where he was going to be taught to be a handyman, and the young women were taught to be domestics. And something got into him, and he believed that he wanted to know more. So he was the first person that he knew that graduated from high school. And then he went to Fullerton College, he went to Santa Ana College, and actually became student body president of Santa Ana College. And then through a strange set of circumstances, made it to UCLA, where he studied sociology, and then went to USC, where he received his master's also in sociology, and used that education to argue against the then dominant ideas of racial and mental inferiority of Mexicans. So he was a community activist and leader, and he and my grandmother ran a settlement house. They were the directors, and they lived in the settlement house in Pasadena for Mexican-American immigrants, and my mother was raised there. And my mother became a teacher as well, and then a principal and assistant superintendent. And my father was a first-generation college student, and he became a teacher, and he taught for 35 years in Buena Park. He was from Buena Park. So it's kind of in my blood, but I certainly didn't start out looking to do this. I went to Fullerton College, and I became really passionate about ethnic studies and about racial and ethnic history. I was really, in those years, my late teens and early 20s, I was really very angry about the inequality and discrimination that I saw around me. And when I entered into that academic field, I understood for the first time that these weren't personal issues, that these were much larger structural issues, but that they had been created by people, therefore they could be deconstructed by us. And so the desire to intervene in that space is what sent me on my path, first at UC San Diego, and then at UCI to study history. And that's what I originally thought I would be doing, was studying and teaching history, particularly racial and ethnic and gender history in the 20th century. And then midway along the way, I got involved in this we called it outreach program in the local schools. And I became really struck by the fact, one, that we have so much to offer each other. We're so much better for it when we work with the schools. We have something to offer. The schools have something to offer us. We can only do these things together. But also, I became really dissatisfied with just teaching the students who had made it into those seats, those privileged seats in the classrooms at UCI. And I started thinking that what I really wanted to do was I wanted to work to make sure more students had access to those seats that maybe wouldn't have been there before.
Wow. So fast forward, you're part of a team that has really made a difference at a major university, UC Irvine, in terms of some of their accomplishments that for kids of color, for first generation immigrants. Can you share with the audience some of the work that you've been part of at UC Irvine?
I was lucky enough to follow my predecessor really laid the groundwork. So I have to start by giving credit where credit is due. Dr. Juan Francisco Lara and Dr. Manuel Gomez were both senior leaders at the university and recognized back in the 80s that there was a really important role for the university in working with our local schools to make sure that students from our own community and broader into South LA who did not have the same opportunities that other students did had an equal shot, because we really knew that we needed them. UCI needed them, and all of the universities needed them. So they built these partnerships that I had the good grace to get to follow up on. But they were working really hard, and it was slow going in those early years. When I came into the role just about 11 years ago, we kind of hovered at 6 to 8% of Latinx students at the campus. And now we're at about 25, 26%. So, and many of the other campuses are also seeing those strides. So we've been able to really focus on our work with our schools to make sure that students have those opportunities and that preparation, and that we're doing our part to work with schools in partnership with schools who are working so hard to achieve these same goals. So it's doing it together, right? As well as really looking at the support systems that students step into when they come to our campus. So I've been lucky enough to be part of, there have always been a strong stable of programs that focus specifically on first gen and underrepresented students at the university, but we've gotten to do more. Focusing on undocumented students and really strengthening our resources for Dreamers. We've also gotten to work on food access and security and really try to intervene there to make sure that all undergraduate students have a basic standard of living that they can all count on, and that they're not struggling, because we know that a lot of those financial challenges can really impede their ability to meet their degree goals. And then also the things that connect with Anaheim, more and more programs to help students start getting exposed to the world of work and what's going to come after graduation, whether it's graduate school or directly into a career. Because that's one thing that we have really noted, is that particularly first generation and low income students, who most likely do not have a family network and connections in the industry that they want to enter, they often start at a disadvantage if they leave college with nothing but the degree and no experience and no relationships and none of the backstory or implicit knowledge about a career. So we've been working really hard to provide internships and opportunities for students to get exposure to the relationships and the industries that they're interested in joining.
So a big university like the UC, right, which is mainly focused on research. So what are you seeing that the university is doing to help shift the and transform the educational experience at UCI in terms of aligning with this world of work? Because I know that you've done a lot of work in actually hiring young professionals and trying to promote some of these skills that are needed.
Well, I'll talk a little, I'll give a few examples of what the university more broadly is doing. So in addition to working to provide more opportunities for internships and direct exposure into the world of work, even making it part of some degree requirements, there's also a couple other major initiatives that I think are helping students. One that UCI has actually been doing from the beginning is providing undergraduates the opportunity to engage in research. So this is something that many of the UCs, or most of them actually do now, but UCI began. It was typically thought that really you shouldn't be thinking about or being able to participate in research until you were a graduate student. But
Right.
we've pulled that back, and it really needs to be part of the undergraduate experience too, to give undergraduates the opportunity not just to identify potentially places that they're passionate about that they may want to pursue, but also we believe they can actually create knowledge right now. They don't need to just be absorbing it. They can be part of that process. And then the other is all the work around supporting entrepreneurship and seeing that students don't need to necessarily wait until they go to business school or wait until they leave the university. They can actually create, build, patent, and grow businesses while they're currently undergraduate students. So we've really put a lot of effort into providing those opportunities and support systems for students to experience both of those things that I think really can launch them into the world of work. And then in terms of my own work, the Center for Educational Partnerships, which is a part of my portfolio, we have about 318, I think, staff members right now. And about half of those are student employees. So we have a lot of folks who are first job out of college, or maybe the second. So I work with a lot of young professionals, and I take really seriously the role of supporting and mentoring them. Having recognized that, spending many years working through university administration, I realized that there are a lot of things that lead to your success that nobody tells you, that you have to discover the hard way,
Right.
through mistakes. And a lot of those things don't need to be learned that way. So I try really hard to be very explicit and try to make visible kind of what we used to call the invisible curriculum.
Yeah.
So a lot of that really relates to, which is why I love our work, relates to the 5 C's, and it's very connected to understanding how to communicate. So students, they don't, or young professionals get the job because they know they have some knowledge, but having knowledge doesn't necessarily make you successful if you don't know how to work with other people. So,
Yeah, that is a big challenge. I know that you've talked about the the educational world has been put a lot of emphasis on the technical or the STEM skills, right? The STEM areas, the hard sciences and math, whereas leaders like you are saying, hey, don't forget about the liberal arts and the STEAM area, right? Could you talk a little bit about that and talk in terms of our audience, because many of them are parents and they're concerned about jobs for their kids, and they're thinking about STEM areas, right? Which we know that that's where the jobs are, but why are the liberal arts, in your opinion, still so important?
I really appreciate you asking that, because this is something I feel very passionate about. Um, so a couple things. One is, I think, when you, I appreciate that Anaheim, a lot of districts are looking very specifically at the technical skills that they believe are going to take students directly into a particular job. One thing I'll note about that is that when you look at the way jobs and industries are changing so rapidly, I'll just say that I was required to learn how to program in COBOL, which is an obsolete, right, language, computer programming wise. So this is an example of, as soon as we teach students something very specific and technical, then the technology has changed. And the skills that you gain in liberal arts courses, in literature, in writing, in history, in philosophy, etc., of critically analyzing a problem, looking at an issue from multiple perspectives, building an argument out of evidence, synthesizing different information and being able to communicate complex ideas in different ways. All these skills are broadly applicable in any field, no matter what changes. So even in terms of direct job skills, sometimes I think it's really underappreciated what skills students gain in liberal arts courses that will carry them through life. The other thing I'll say is that, all you have to do is turn on the television today to see the kinds of major challenges our country and our world are facing, that are not necessarily going to be solved through technology or through a science course. Understanding the value of human beings across racial, gender, ethnic, religious, sexuality, across different lines is really, I think, it's the major problem of our age. And for me, like, the greatest example of this is thinking about the Holocaust and medical doctors who performed really inhumane experiments on Jewish people, and understanding that it wasn't that those doctors didn't get enough biology courses. That's not what they were missing. And so I really believe that as we look forward, if we're not continuing to think about exposing students to literature and history and things that help them understand the world around them and other people, I think we're doing the future a great disservice.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's that type of analogy with artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, right? Not having a grounding in ethics or understanding the interconnectedness of the world can be a big problem, considering a lot of the folks that are into artificial intelligence are pretty much, the STEM folks, which are white males, right? That's what we see. So this is why I know that you're really trying to expand and the profile of the demographic of folks that come into the STEM major. But let's take it full circle. I mean, you started off as a ethnic studies, gender, major, and you have your PhD in that area. Why is that? Do you think that's still relevant today in terms of, just going deeper into the liberal arts and the humanities? Why is it? Why does ethnic studies or matter today? Do you think?
Oh my goodness! Again, I think all you need to do is really turn on the television, and you see that what is really stopping us from making the kinds of advances that we need to make is the ability for folks to understand and communicate and value one another. So
do you think the question is, does ethnic studies divide or does it bring people together?
I do not believe it divides. I think that's a false narrative. I think that education is power. And I think that whether you are learning about it, as I did, from the standpoint of a minoritized group, learning to be able to value and understand your own history, in ways that you weren't taught often in K-12 is incredibly empowering. But I think it's equally of value for folks who are from a dominant group to understand a perspective that they've most likely never been taught or perhaps even exposed to in their network. I think ethnic studies can be the foundation of so much that we need in this world.
Wow, powerful advice from the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Educational Partnerships, Dr. Stephanie Reyes-Tuccio. Time really flew by, and hope to have you on again at some time to continue this amazing discussion and to hear more about your amazing journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Superintendent Matsuda. See you later.